Well, some reports about the White House and likely fake news, but we thought we would explore this with you. President Trump's rising frustration with White House Chief of Staff John Kelly and Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen apparently is rising still. In addition, the top deputy to National Security Advisor John Bolton, Mira Ricardel, is in some jeopardy, apparently, because of clashes with First Lady Melania Trump and her staff. Now, I find the latter one to be amazing. Stephanie Grisham, the First Lady's chief of staff, saying that Ricardel no longer deserves the honor of working in the White House. That sounds like a very significant problem, doesn't it, for Ricardel? If her understanding of power is so limited that she would take on the president's wife, maybe she didn't belong in national security at all, but certainly not in the Trump White House. We'll see what happens. Joining us now to take this up and possible high-level changes following the midterms, Niger Innis, the national spokesperson for the Congress on Racial Equality. Great to see you, Niger. Gina Loudon joins us as well, political analyst, member of the President's Media Advisory Board, author of the terrific book, Mad Politics, which we recommend to you highly. Great to see you both. Gina, let me start with you. How could someone involved in national security not understand power to the degree that they would work pretty hard not to offend the First Lady?
Yes, I can't imagine, Lou, that you would want to offend the First Lady. And the First Lady seems to me to be somebody with an exceedingly high level of tolerance for people who are critical or bombastic in a myriad of forms, especially the media. And so I'm a little bit surprised by this story as well. But I think that the left sort of leaps onto these stories, Lou, of palace intrigue, which I don't think are all that intriguing in a lot of cases, because this is a president who works people 20 hours a day. We know this, Lou. And so we shouldn't be surprised, especially right after midterms, that there are going to be some changes.
There are going to be some changes, and particularly when the First Lady's chief of staff releases a statement saying that someone doesn't deserve to be in the White House. It rises above the usual reportage of the fake news. Don't you think, Niger?
Absolutely. I think Ricardel is gone. I think it is absolutely abysmally foolish on her part to, from what I understand, the squabble was over seating on the plane to Africa when the First Lady went to Africa, which is absurd. And it is not wise to get into a fight with the First Lady of the United States. I think Kelly has been rumored to wanting to leave and that Trump wants him out. I'm not so sure how true that is.
Yeah, I
think Kelly has been a very stable force within the administration. If he decides to go because of just timing, that's fine. But I think his tenure was a very solid tenure. He brought a great deal of stability and normalcy to the White House. And I think regardless of personality conflicts that might have existed between him and the president, it seemed to have worked out very well for this administration. Nielsen, on the other hand, I think there's a little bit more to that rumor. There are a lot of folk, perhaps you, Lou, certainly our buddy Ann Coulter, and others that had real doubts about Nielsen being Homeland Security Secretary, being strong on immigration and on building the wall. And it's been expressed and reported that the president has been very frustrated with her lack of aggression in dealing with the illegal immigration problem. So I think those rumors could very well be true. And like Gina said, it's not unusual that there be turnover in the administration.
There's nothing unusual, but all of the reporting today is worthy of note. Gina, I want to turn to you. You know Palm Beach, and Palm Beach and Broward counties are acting like their history. They're reenacting it. They've got huge problems. You were down at the Board of Elections. What do you think?
Yeah, I was at Palm Beach County today. I will be at Broward County tomorrow morning. My husband has actually done the official watching of it, and so I'm quite, I know more about this, Lou, than I ever wanted to know, let me assure you. The chain of custody is really the problem here. There is a lot of fraud that takes place before things, before the ballots ever hit, right, before they're ever actually all in this massive warehouse that we're looking at now. But even in this massive warehouse, Lou, you should know that Republicans are cordoned off by the supervisor of elections to this tiny little section and not allowed to be in any other part of this massive warehouse where all of these ballots sit. So when they come back out to be counted or to be evaluated or judged in their court there, it makes you wonder where they've been, who's had their hands on them. Now, they'll tell you there are sheriffs around, and there are.
Who is putting up with a board of elections that would do that? I mean, I'm sure the Republican Party has some high-powered attorneys there. And by the way, they do control the governor's office. Why not move in and take control of this thing? Why would Niger, why would anybody put up with that in either party?
I think that is absolutely the question. I don't understand how the heck Snipes not only got appointed to the position in Broward County, but after getting smacked down.
Talk to Jeb Bush.
And after getting smacked down by several judges for mixing legitimate provisional ballots with illegitimate ballots, being questioned several times, destroying ballots. It's like, how did this lady keep her position? How the heck is she in this powerful position? The other question is...
Let me answer that question. That's Governor Rick Scott, who chose not to do anything.
Which is unfortunate. The obvious question, there were a tremendous hurricane that hit several parts of Florida, several counties, including counties in the Panhandle. Somehow they were able to get in their provisional ballots, their regular ballots in, and Broward has mysteriously coming up with new votes.
Niger, and by the way, that's one of Matt Gaetz' great tweets talking about the counties that were hit by hurricanes and had no problem making the deadlines. Niger, Innis, great to see you. Gina Loudon, great to see you.